They came with tears in their eyes. Well, something close to tears. The alien species, the Valari, didn't cry like us. Their faces were hard to read, all shimmering skin and slitted eyes, but desperation? That you could smell. And when they landed on Earth, begging for help, most of the world didn't even care to listen. But someone did. Commander Reeve sat at the far end of the boardroom table, the lights low, the walls pulsing with quiet data streams. The Valari envoy trembled as it spoke, voice filtered through a translator box. Their enemy was brutal. The Zarn, a hive species, black-skinned and cold-blooded, expanding across the stars, destroying civilizations like weeds underfoot. The Valari had no armies left. Their homeworld burned. And now they had come to the one place known for its history of refusing to kneel. Earth. Reeve didn't speak at first. His face was a map of scars, each one a memory. His eyes weren't the soft kind. He didn't blink unless it was needed. And when he did speak, it was slow, quiet, deadly calm. You want help from humans? The Valari bowed again. Yes, we were told. Humans fight when others fall. That your warriors are unlike any we have seen. Reeve didn't laugh. He just looked around the table at the others. Generals, politicians, corporate donors, all silent. You're not wrong, he said. Then he stood. Reeve didn't call for an army. He didn't issue orders to green recruits or bureaucrats in shiny uniforms. He called for legends, the ones whose names were whispered in war zones, men who were ghosts on paper, who disappeared into missions that never existed, who came back broken, or didn't come back at all. Some said the fleet of legends wasn't real, that they were just war stories, told by soldiers too drunk to forget. But they were real, and Reeve still had the blacklist that held every name. 3 days later, they gathered in a hangar deep beneath the Rockies. No fanfare, no press, just cold steel and colder eyes. There was Briggs, the demolitions expert who once turned an asteroid base into a firestorm. They said he laughed while the bodies burned. Cole, the sniper whose bullet had ended a dictator's reign, while blindfolded. Jax, the close combat freak. Rumor said he killed with his bare hands because he liked to feel it. And Reeve? He didn't ask them to come. He told them the truth. The Valari need help. The Zarn are pushing across the system. They want to enslave everything they touch. Briggs cracked his knuckles. So? They're offering full command authority. No rules, no politics. We do what we do best. Cole's eyes narrowed. And what's that? Reeve didn't blink. We win. Silence held for a moment. Then Jax grinned. Hell, I thought you'd never ask they didn't board a standard fleet. No, this was something different. These weren't Navy ships with chain of command and clean sheets. These were retrofitted war beasts, custom-built, AI-driven destroyers designed for autonomy and brutality. They named the fleet Judgment. And when it launched from Earth's dark side, no human press was allowed to report it. No flags were waved. Just cold fire from the engines as they vanished into the stars. The Valari gave them coordinates, what was left of their colonies, the front lines where the Zarn swarmed like rats over a corpse. But the legends didn't rush in blind. Reeve sat in his command chair, watching the stars blur past. We don't fight for them, he said quietly to the crew. We fight for us, because if the Zarn come here one day, we either kill them now or bury our children later. They nodded. Every one of them had fought wars Earth pretended didn't happen. This time, they wanted the truth, the dirt, the blood, the justice. What none of them knew, what even Reeve hadn't predicted, was that the Valari weren't telling the whole story. And the legends weren't flying into a war to save the galaxy. They were flying into a trap. Silence reigned inside the ship, but it wasn't peace. Peace was something that didn't exist in the hearts of the men aboard the Judgment. Each of them sat in a haunted stillness, not out of calm, but out of habit. Habit of waiting, habit of hunting, habit of expecting things to go wrong. Commander Reeve leaned back in his chair, watching stars streak by the observation window. The ship's AI, Cora, hummed low in the background, processing coordinates and threat maps in the blink of an eye. Reeve's face remained impassive, but inside, something gnawed at him. The Valari envoy had begged, practically fallen on its knees. That desperation had felt real enough. But Reeve had seen desperation before. He'd seen politicians cry when they wanted favors, seen murderers sob when they needed an alibi. Desperation was a mask, and Reeve had lived too long to be moved by masks. Briggs stomped in, throwing down a crate of thermal grenades with a grunt. Coordinates lead us into Zarn-occupied territory. 6 systems already confirmed gone. Nothing but wreckage and radiation. Anything salvageable? Reeve asked. Not unless you count broken bones and melted cities. Jack strolled in behind him, twisting a combat knife in his fingers like he was flirting with death. Funny how the Valari left out one tiny detail. Reeve turned. Which? There's no sign of resistance anywhere. No stranded colonies, no surviving Valari ships in distress. Just empty. Dead. Reeve stiffened. That wasn't just a red flag. That was a flare in the dark. Cole? He called into comms. The sniper's voice came through, crisp, bored. Been running deep scans, no transmissions, no defense networks either. Either they've been wiped out completely or... He trailed off. Or what? Reeve pressed. Or this was never a battlefield. It was a slaughterhouse. The air inside the command deck thickened. Reeve stood slowly, crossing to the holomap as it rendered a projection of the Valari systems. The planets didn't just look devastated, they looked erased, too clean, too final. What the hell are we walking into? Briggs muttered. Reeve clenched his jaw. Call the fleet captains, all of them. Emergency session, now. Inside the war room of the flagship Judgment, the command team stood around a red-lit table, the holographic map still shifting through galactic topography. There were 12 ships in the fleet, each captained by someone the government would deny even existed. They weren't soldiers. They were problem solvers of the dirtiest kind. Captain Lorik, a brutal man who once single-handedly took down a pirate empire, spat a wad of tobacco into a recycling bin. Feels wrong. I've seen annihilation, but this is sterilization. You think the Valari lied? Asked Cade, pilot of the gunship Widowmaker. I think they're hiding something worse, Reeve said flatly. The question is, Cole's voice drawled again over comms, what the hell do they want with us? Everyone in the room stared at Reeve, and for once, even he didn't have a ready answer. 6 hours later, the fleet emerged into the Valari core system, or what used to be one. Debris floated in space like frozen blood. A massive ring once orbiting a gas giant now spiraled in shattered chunks. Cities, entire floating cities, drifted lifelessly, their lights dark, their surfaces torn open by something sharp and massive. And in the center of it all, a signal. It wasn't Valari, it wasn't Zarn. It was something new. Reeve stared at the signal pattern and felt the back of his neck crawl. That's not a distress beacon, he said. Jax narrowed his eyes. What is it then? A pulse. Reeve looked closer. A frequency. It's a lure. Briggs swore under his breath. It's calling something, Cole added. Something else. Moments later, the alarms triggered. Unidentified vessels appeared from hyperspace. But they weren't Zarn. Not even close. These ships were alien even to alien standards. Organic, pulsating, shifting like they were alive. No heat signatures, no comms, no identification. And they weren't heading toward the Volari. They were heading toward the fleet. The first attack came fast, too fast for standard reaction time. A spear of red light pierced the Widowmaker's outer hull. Shields held, barely. But Cade screamed through comms, "They're scanning our memories! What the hell is this?" His transmission cut off. The entire crew of the Widowmaker went silent. And then they spoke again. But it wasn't them. Every comm channel filled with overlapping voices, each one sounding like Cade, but wrong. Office mechanical, distorted. Reeves' blood went cold. "They're mimicking us." Jax turned to him. "Why would they? To confuse, to trick, to destabilize us." Reeves snapped back. Briggs slammed a fist into the table. "This ain't a rescue mission. It's a damn experiment." The comms screamed again. Dozens of distorted voices now speaking Reeves' own orders back at them. Then the alien ships stopped moving. One opened. A creature emerged, towering, humanoid, cloaked in something shifting like smoke. It hovered, not standing on anything. Its eyes were the color of dying stars. The Volari had said nothing of this. The creature spoke without a mouth, straight into their heads. Legends, yes, good. Test subjects, complete. And in that moment, everything became clear. This wasn't a cry for help. This was a goddamn harvest. Chaos erupted. Reeve ordered the fleet to scatter, evasive maneuvers. Every ship jumped in different directions, taking irregular paths through subspace, avoiding pursuit. But the creature didn't follow. It didn't need to, because the Volari had already done their job. They hadn't lied. Not completely. They were in danger. But they'd made a deal. A trade. In exchange for survival, they offered something else. Not prisoners, not weapons. They offered humanity's best killers. The Judgment barely made it out, limping on one functional drive. The others were worse. Some ships lost half their crews to mental collapse during the psychic pulse. Others never made it out at all. Reeve sat in silence, surrounded by the wounded and the broken. He watched the stars again, but they didn't offer peace this time. Just distance from the betrayal. Cole's voice cracked through again. "Reeve, we found a Volari relay station. Hidden, remote, broadcasting. Put it through." Static burst first, then a voice. It was the same envoy from Earth. "If you're receiving this, then you've survived. Unexpected, but admirable." Reeve didn't blink. The envoy continued, tone calm, almost apologetic. "We gave you to the architects. In exchange, they spared us. Your kind has fascinated them. So emotional, so unpredictable. We did what we had to do." Reeve leaned forward slowly. "So did we." He nodded to Briggs. Briggs didn't hesitate. He launched a virus payload into the transmission relay, overloading it. Seconds later, the Volari relay erupted in an explosion a star away. Cole chuckled grimly. "One down." Reeve's face was carved in stone. "We're not done." Jax paced, flexing his knuckles. "We kill 'em all?" "No." Reeve stood. "We find the architects, and we show them what happens when legends are turned into bait." No one smiled. No one cheered. They just started prepping for war. Real war. The silence in the command deck was thick enough to choke on. Reeve stood motionless as the last spark of the destroyed Volari relay flickered out from the view screen. His knuckles were white on the edge of the table. There were no cheers, no speeches, just that same shared understanding between men who had spent their lives watching empires burn and didn't flinch. Briggs broke the silence. "I say we burn every Volari world next, one by one." "No," Reeve replied. "Not yet. We're not swinging blind. This time we carve out the truth first." Jax leaned against the wall, flipping a knife in slow arcs. "So how do we find these architects? You think the Volari were just middlemen?" Reeve didn't answer immediately. He turned and walked toward the sealed intelligence room at the rear of the ship. Only 3 people aboard had access. He was one of them. Inside, lights flickered awake. The walls were lined with data feeds, intercepted transmissions, black site footage, intel too dangerous or disturbing to ever hit Earth's public channels. He keyed in a phrase, "non-human neural mimicry entities." The AI paused. Then it pulled up a restricted file tagged A-Class Anomaly, Red Sigil Protocol. Cole's face appeared in the corner of the comms, watching from his sniper perch. "What are we looking at?" "Something buried," Reeve murmured. "Something Earth knew about, and pretended didn't exist." 10 years earlier, a listening post beyond Saturn picked up strange signals, distorted human speech, in voices that hadn't been alive for decades. Some of those voices belonged to soldiers declared missing during covert missions. Others were the voices of political dissidents, and a few of people who never existed on paper at all. The source of the signal was a dead zone past Pluto, a black rift in space where sensors bent and time stuttered. They sent a probe. It vanished in under 10 minutes. Reeve had been one of the first to read that report back when he still wore medals and pretended to believe in governments. He'd buried it in the dark, along with the part of him that once believed Earth could stand on truth. Now, that file came back like a ghost. The fleet limped toward an old refueling station on the fringe of the Casson Belt. No affiliation, no allegiance, just a den of outlaws, pirates, and rogue AI who didn't care who you were as long as you paid. They docked under false ID. Reeve wore a hood and a scowl. Briggs carried his pulse cannon like a child's toy. Jax, with his dead-eyed grin, made sure no one got too curious. Their contact was a man called Varric, a former intelligence analyst gone rogue. He owed Reeve his life from a mission that left 3 platoons dead and 1 empire destabilized. Varric didn't smile when he saw Reeve. "You shouldn't be here." "No one should," Reeve replied. "But we are. I need data." Varric led them to a hidden chamber beneath the station, shielded against scans. "You're not going to like it." "I haven't liked anything in 20 years, Reeve said flatly. Varric activated a panel and pulled up a star map overlay with heat signatures. The Volari have been in contact with the architects for longer than anyone realized, at least 15 Earth years. The architects, they don't invade. They experiment. Entire species have vanished after alliances with them. He tapped on one red dot. This is where they took the most recent batch, including human units. Reeve leaned closer. Coordinates. Varric hesitated. "I'm giving you this, but don't come back asking for help. This is where the monsters live." They departed without ceremony. There were no goodbyes, no celebrations. The crew of the Judgment prepped in silence. Some polished weapons, others stared into the void, and a few recorded final messages they knew would never be sent. Cole joined Reeve in the observation deck just before jump. "You think they even know what they started?" he asked. Reeve didn't turn. "The Volari made a deal with the devil. We're just making sure they get what devils deserve." "Think we'll survive this?" Reeve paused. "Doesn't matter." Cole nodded once and left. The fleet jumped. The system they emerged into had no sun, no gravity well, no recognizable star signature. It was a dead place. No, older than dead. Pre-life. The ships around them didn't move like machines. They moved like thoughts, flickering, bending, twisting through folds in space. Jax whispered over comms. "Feels like we're inside something's mind." Cole added, "We are." Reeve keyed in the automated launch. The fleet deployed drones in a wide net. Each was equipped with anti-cognitive firewalls and memory shielding. Last-ditch tech designed for situations exactly like this. One drone made it 20 seconds. It sent back 3 seconds of video. Reeve watched it alone. What he saw was impossible. Human bodies floating in orbit, eyes wide, lips moving silently. Not corpses. Not quite. Their mouths were whispering words in reverse, and on their skin, etched in something like fire, were symbols that pulsed to the rhythm of a heartbeat, not their own. Reeve didn't speak of it to anyone. The first real contact came not with ships, but with sound. Frequencies began penetrating the hull, not weaponized, not deadly. They were messages, spoken in the voice of each crew member's greatest regret. Briggs slammed his head against a bulkhead, roaring to drown out the voice of a daughter he'd buried 12 years ago. Jax sat in the medbay, covered in blood. Not from combat, but from clawing at his own ears. Cole remained eerily calm. "They're not trying to kill us," he said. "They want to understand us, and to understand, they peel us open." "Let them try," Reeve said. He activated the override protocol. It was time to unleash the weapons no one wanted to admit Earth had ever built. They called it the Black Rain. Nanite swarms that targeted neural signatures and cognitive energy, designed to kill not bodies, but minds. They released it into the void. And the architects noticed. For the first time, one of the living ships screamed. The retaliation was brutal. Half of the fleet lost shields in seconds. One ship was folded in on itself, its crew fused into a single pulsing mass of flesh. But the Black Rain worked. Whatever the architects were, they weren't immune to madness. The final battle didn't happen in space. It happened inside minds. Reeve found himself standing in a memory, his own, except twisted. He was back on Earth, in a hospital corridor, watching a woman walk away. His wife. She'd left him after his 4th deployment. He hadn't stopped her. Now she turned back, and her face was wrong. Empty. Melting. "You chose war," she whispered. Reeve clenched his fists. "I chose truth." And then he shot the hallucination between the eyes. The simulation shattered. And Reeve stood once again on the bridge, covered in sweat, his pulse racing, as the AI announced a single word. Breached. The architect's ship cracked open. Inside there was no crew, just mirrors, thousands of them. Each one showed a reflection of a human soldier, not as they were, but as the architects feared them, monstrous, furious, unbeatable. Reeve stood before his own mirror. The version of him inside wasn't human. It was made of war, a god of vengeance. And that's when he understood. The architects hadn't brought them here to study. They brought them here because they were afraid. Afraid of humans. Afraid of what humanity became when it stopped caring about peace. Afraid of legends. Reeve raised his weapon, and he fired into his reflection. The mirrors shattered. The ship died. In the silence that followed, the surviving fleet drifted in the black. No more enemies came. No more voices whispered. Just the quiet, heavy truth that they were now something more than soldiers. They were symbols, warnings written in fire across the stars. And they were still very much alive. The fleet drifted through the vacuum of a graveyard. The stars in this system didn't shine. They loomed, dark, massive, ancient. Even the cosmic radiation felt wrong. The void was thicker here. Deader. It was as if they weren't just in space, but inside something that resented their presence. Reeve sat in the command chair aboard the Judgment, staring blankly at the readouts. The Volari had offered them up like meat to something far older than the Zarn. And now, after barely surviving that first contact, the surviving fleet members had to face an undeniable truth. They weren't fighting a war. They were interrupting a harvest. "Status on the Widowmaker?" Reeve asked without turning. Cole's voice came through instantly. "We recovered one black box. The ship's gone. Cade's gone. Whatever those things did, it wasn't physical. It was memory-based. His whole record's been corrupted. It's like he never existed." Briggs stood nearby, jaw clenched. "They erased him from our files?" Reeve nodded. "From our files and from our minds. That's what they are. Not just killers, but rewriters. They don't destroy you. They overwrite you, like editing a book while it's still being written." Jax finally spoke. "And we were supposed to be the last chapter." Reeve stood slowly. "We were supposed to die without anyone asking why." The remnants of the fleet regrouped on a hidden base orbiting a rogue planet. It had no light, no heat, and barely any atmosphere. But it was off the grid. A ghost station from the interstellar Cold War, long forgotten. Inside, it was worse than cold. It was haunted. The station had seen its own horrors: rogue AI testing, genetic modification experiments, nerve gas trials. Now it would serve a new purpose, a staging ground for the last humans who remembered what revenge felt like. Reeve called for a closed-circuit meeting. The captains of the remaining 5 ships joined him, weathered, vicious, half-insane men who knew better than to trust anything that called itself a government. "We've been lied to," Reeve said. "We weren't called to help the Volari. We were delivered. Gift-wrapped. They made a deal with an entity that doesn't operate in diplomacy. It operates in extinction. And now we know their name." He tapped a button. The holotable glowed blood red. "The architects," no one asked for clarification. They'd all seen the reflections, all heard the voices. "They feed on cognition, memories, identity. They absorb species by unmaking them, rewriting every trace of their history and folding it into their own. That's why the Volari survived. They offered us instead, the most unpredictable, violent, and self-destructive race in the galaxy. And the most dangerous," Briggs growled. Reeve looked each man in the eye. "That's why we're still here, because we don't follow the rules. We never did. We're not the Federation's heroes. We're the problems they bury, and now we're going to become something the architects can't consume." Cole smirked. "What's that?" Reeve grinned, cold and sharp. "Unforgettable." Operation Black Ember was born in that room, a full-scale retaliation, but not a battle, not yet. First they needed information, and for that, they'd need a prisoner. The architects didn't talk, but their tools did. One of their scout ships had been damaged during the psychic breach. It drifted in orbit, leaking plasma, half alive and half screaming in a language that wasn't made of words. Briggs led the boarding party. "I want it intact," Reeve warned him. "I'll bring it back wrapped in a bow." Briggs didn't come back with a bow. He came back with blood. "Whatever's inside that ship, it doesn't die like we do. We shot it. It reformed. We torched it. It screamed. And then it learned. It started mimicking our tactics before we even finished fighting. But I got a piece of it." He held up a containment unit. Inside floated a piece of flesh, gray, rippling, covered in tiny mouths. Reeve nodded. "Get it to the AI core." The ship's AI, Cora, had never hesitated before. She'd processed black sites, war crimes, and psychological weapons. But when Reeve handed over the architect sample, she stalled. "This entity exists in multiple timelines simultaneously," she said. "What does that mean?" "It remembers events that haven't happened yet. It reacts to futures we haven't experienced." Jax leaned over the table. "So it's psychic?" "No," Cora replied. "It's inevitable." Reeve stepped forward. "Then we rewrite the ending." The interrogations didn't work. Traditional methods failed. Neural scans returned static. Memory probes triggered seizures in the techs. But then Cole tried something different. He walked in alone. No tools, no tech, just a knife and an old photograph. He held up the picture. A little boy, a backyard, sunlight. My brother, Cole said, died in a raid back on Mars. I remember the day like it was yesterday. But you don't, do you? You don't remember anything real. You only absorb. Parasitic freak. The flesh in the containment unit twitched. See, I think you're afraid of something. Not pain, not death, but confusion. Because you don't understand why humans fight harder when we've lost everything. You think survival is the end goal. Cole stepped closer. For us, sometimes the goal is just making sure you die first. The flesh shrieked. They learned a few things. The architects were not a species. They were a collection, an archive. Every race they'd consumed had become part of their code. They didn't kill out of malice. They killed because they didn't believe anything different should be allowed to exist. They were logic gone wrong. Order taken to the extreme. Reeves' lips curled. So that's it. They're afraid of chaos. He looked at his team. Good. Because chaos is what we do. They went dark after that. No more open comms. No more fleet trails. They split into cells, operated like insurgents. The galaxy thought they were dead. Even Earth stopped broadcasting search pings. But the Volari didn't forget. Their government issued a formal statement. The human fleet went rogue. They attacked innocent systems. They are now enemies of peace. Reeve watched the broadcast in silence. They're rewriting the story, Jack said. Reeve didn't reply. He was already planning the rewrite of his own. They struck back in pieces. First, a Volari diplomatic station, vaporized by an EMP warhead laced with memory-fracturing pulses. Every survivor forgot who they were for 36 hours. Then, a transmission tower broadcasting architect codes, shut down by a sniper shot fired from half a planet away. And finally, the grand gesture, the capture of a Volari prime minister during a peace summit. They didn't kill him. They made him remember. Briggs injected him with a serum, one Reeve had developed personally. It unlocked memories. His memories. Of the deal. Of the betrayal. Of the human children they handed over during the early trials. The screams that followed weren't from pain. They were from guilt. I didn't know, the minister cried. You didn't care, Reeve corrected. Then he handed the footage over to the Galactic Net and let the truth spread like wildfire. Within weeks, the Volari government collapsed, and within months the architects responded. Not with ships, with dreams. Entire colonies began experiencing nightmares, shared visions of the same dark structure. A tower made of mirrors, a spiral of voices, a throne with no one sitting on it, and in every dream, humans stood in front of the throne, laughing, unbroken. And then the throne cracked. The war wasn't won, but it had changed. The architects had revealed themselves too soon. They tried to consume something they couldn't comprehend. Humanity wasn't logical. It wasn't clean. It wasn't supposed to survive. But somehow, it always did. And now? Now it wanted payback. Time moved differently in war, slower in moments of silence, faster when blood was spilled. But now time didn't seem to move at all. Reeve stood alone on the observation deck, watching the galactic map rotate. They'd struck first. They'd shown the architects that humanity would not go quietly into assimilation. And for the first time, they'd forced these creatures of thought and memory into reaction. The fleet was fractured, scattered across deep space in isolated pods. Their communication was relayed through non-linear encryption, bouncing through dying stars, black holes, and long-abandoned satellites. No one used real names anymore. Not since the last time the architects traced one. Reeve was Ghost Father now. Cole had taken on Echo 7. Jax simply Red. Briggs didn't change his name. He just grunted and said, "Let them come." The war had changed them. Not just physically. though half the fleet had undergone surgeries to shield their minds, but mentally, spiritually, whatever the hell you wanted to call it, they were no longer human in the way Earth remembered. They were something new, something unkillable. The architects hadn't stayed idle. They had recalibrated. The nightmares that once haunted colonies had stopped. Not because the architects had given up, but because they'd changed tactics. Now the dreams were hopeful, peaceful, manipulative. Entire outposts were falling without a shot fired. People began turning off defense systems, welcoming the final evolution. It was psychological warfare on a scale even Earth's Black Ops divisions hadn't imagined. Reeve watched footage from a station called Meridian 6. Civilians marched into ships made of light, smiling, weeping, praising the architects like gods. They weren't dragged. They volunteered. Cole's voice crackled through. Stockholm Syndrome in hyperspeed. No, Reeve said grimly. This is worse. They're not afraid anymore. They're grateful. That changed everything. The fleet's new mission wasn't just military. It was ideological. They had to infect the galaxy with resistance. They had to remind people of pain, fear, and betrayal. As brutal as it sounded, those emotions were anchors, proof of identity. So they attacked. Not the architects, not directly. They attacked the idea of the architects. Reeve authorized Operation Shatterglass. One by one, they found the Ascension Chambers, massive stations where converted species worshipped the architects and awaited absorption. Briggs led the assault on the first. It wasn't a battle. It was a massacre. The chambers were protected by illusions, by feelings of euphoria. But once the fleet broke through, once the real world hit, the illusion cracked. And those inside, they weren't praying. They were being harvested. Piles of skin, bones stripped of memory, echoing with laughter that wasn't theirs. Jax walked through one corridor and came out silent, blood dripping from his fingers. He didn't explain what he saw. Didn't have to. The visuals went out to every unaligned outpost across the galaxy. And suddenly, Ascension didn't look like salvation anymore. It looked like a slow suicide. But the architects weren't done. They responded again, not with fleets or weapons, but with truth. They broadcasted a message, everywhere, across every frequency, every neural channel, every subconscious, and it was simple. It was Reeve's face, unsmiling, empty, then a voice. This is the man who chose war over peace, pain over purpose, memory over unity. He leads the last fragments of a dying species. Then the video changed. Children screaming on Earth during the Red Riots, soldiers executing prisoners during the Titan Rebellion, the nuclear fires of Europa. This is humanity. This is who they are, and this is who they follow. Reeve watched it all in silence. Didn't blink, didn't flinch. Then he turned off the feed and looked at the crew. Good, he said. Let them remember what we're capable of. The message fractured the galaxy. Some species began rejecting humans openly, fearing what they represented. Others, especially the broken, the desperate, the angry, began following. Outlaws, warlords, survivors. The fleet started receiving requests, not for peace, for weapons. One came from a man named Darnell Vrex, a former mining baron who now controlled a planet-wide resistance network. Reeve met him in a hollowed-out asteroid station. No guards, no pretenses. Vrex poured a drink. You know what I like about humans? You don't hide who you are. Everyone else pretends to be civilized. You show your teeth. Reeve took the glass and stared him down. We're not here to make friends. Vrex laughed. Good. I'm not here to survive. I'm here to kill gods. They shook hands. A new alliance was born, one the architects couldn't predict. Meanwhile, the deeper cells of the fleet began studying the captured architect fragment. Cora, the AI, had isolated a repeating pattern buried in its synaptic layers. "It's a memory," she told Reeve. "Whose?" "Not one of ours. The architects absorbed it from a species long gone, and the memory is rejected. It hurts them." Reeve leaned forward. "Show me." The memory played. A simple thing. A child screaming as a loved one was taken. Grief, rage, loss. "They can't process it," Cora said. "They erase pain to function. It's poison to them." Reeve whispered, "Then let's make a galaxy's worth." He issued the order, Project Iron Echo. They began broadcasting raw human trauma, unfiltered, uncensored, uncontained, into architect-controlled space. The results were instant. One of the architect harvest ships collapsed in on itself. The AI diagnosed it as cognitive overload. The second one tried to fight back, but its weapons turned on itself. The fleet had found their weapon: emotion, suffering, memory. The very things the architects tried to erase were now being weaponized against them. But war costs. The architects struck back, not with ships, but with doubt. Jax started hallucinating. He saw his sister, long dead, walking the halls of the judgment. He heard her laugh. She blamed him for her death. He didn't sleep for days. Briggs stopped talking altogether. Cole began recording goodbye messages. And Reeve? Reeve received a data package from Earth, an encrypted file. Inside, footage of a secret meeting, politicians, generals, the Valari envoy, and the plan to offer up the fleet. "Send them," one general said. "They're ghosts anyway." "They'll fight to the end," another added. "Might buy us enough time." Reeve sat in silence. So this was never about saving the Valari. It was about stalling the architects while Earth found a way to surrender. He closed the file, deleted it, then issued a fleet-wide command. "We were never meant to win, but now, we damn well will." They called it the Shard System. 6 shattered moons, orbiting a decaying gas giant, barely clinging to their orbits. It was a dead region, unstable and ignored by most of the galaxy. But that's why Reeve chose it. They needed a base no one would look for, a place to sharpen their blades before the next cut. The judgment floated like a phantom above the wreckage, its scarred hull lit by flickering lights, engines barely holding together, systems patched with salvaged code. But inside, it was still alive. Reeve stood on the command deck, eyes fixed on the projections in front of him. They weren't maps, they were people, thousands of them, faces from across the stars, each one marked as converted, lost, or recoverable. Emotion had become their greatest weapon, but it came at a cost. Cole walked in without knocking. "We've got a problem." Reeve didn't look away from the screen. "Only one?" Cole tossed a datapad onto the table. "The Earth Council just issued a directive. Official disavowal of the fleet. They're calling us war criminals, terrorists, traitors." Reeve didn't flinch. "Expected?" "There's more. They're opening negotiations with the architects." Now Reeve turned. "What?" "They're calling it a coexistence accord. Mutual cognitive neutrality. Basically, Earth gives them limited access to consciousness streams, our cultural memory, for peace." Reeve stared at the screen like he could burn a hole through it. "They're trading the soul of humanity for safety," he muttered. "They don't even know what they're giving up," Cole said. "No," Reeve replied, cold fury rising. "They do. That's what makes it worse." The meeting room inside the judgment was quieter than usual. No banter, no cursing, just the distant hum of a ship that had survived too many wars and too much betrayal. Briggs sat at the far end, arms crossed, face stone. Jax stood in the corner, sharpening a knife, metal singing with every stroke. Cole leaned back in his chair, boots on the table, but even he looked 10 years older. Reeve walked in and didn't sit. "They've sold us out," he said flatly. "Earth, the Valari, the entire Alliance Council, we were never soldiers, we were leverage. Now we're liabilities." Briggs growled. "Let's burn it all down." "Not yet," Reeve said. "We have one final strike left, and this time we won't be the ghosts hiding in the dark. We'll be the storm." He keyed the holomap. A new target appeared. The Beacon Array, the primary neural amplifier used by the architects to distribute their influence across the galaxy. Not a physical base, but a psychic nexus embedded in a planet-sized structure deep within architect space. Cole raised an eyebrow. "That's suicide." "It's worse," Reeve agreed. "But if we take it down, we don't just hurt them. We cut them off." Jax finally spoke. "Then let's do it." Briggs cracked his knuckles. "No gods, no kings, just consequences." The fleet didn't fly in formation anymore. They moved like whispers, across gravity wells, inside solar flares, beneath the skin of dying stars. Each ship was an anomaly, designed to warp radar, confuse sensors, and disrupt mental scans. They didn't need camouflage. They were camouflage. Getting to the Beacon Array meant flying through the Architect Core. It wasn't space, not anymore. The laws of physics bent there. Ships twisted, reshaped, had to be held together by sheer willpower. Minds frayed at the edges, voices whispered from the engines, and some crew members just vanished. Names forgotten, photos erased, identities wiped. But Reeve didn't stop. He sat in the command chair, hands locked, mind like a steel trap. Cora, the AI, spoke quietly. "Human stress levels are reaching critical," Reeve answered. "Good. Keep us there. Pain is clarity." When they reached the Beacon Array, it wasn't what they expected. It wasn't a fortress. It was beautiful. A shimmering structure, floating in a sea of black, pulsing with light and memory. Echoes of joy, peace, music, love, all the emotions humanity had learned to fear in war, radiated from it. Jax looked unsettled. "It's perfect." "That's the trap," Reeve said. "They make you want it. They make you feel safe. Then they erase you." The fleet surrounded the array. No resistance. No ships. No alarms. "Why aren't they stopping us?" Briggs muttered. "They don't think we can destroy it," Cole said. Reeve stood. "Let's prove them wrong." The plan was simple. Briggs and Jax would lead the infiltration, carrying a neural disruptor core, designed to overload the beacon from the inside. Cole would remain in orbit, covering the exit path. Reeve would control the override codes from the Judgment. But nothing went as planned. Inside the beacon, reality collapsed. Jax walked into a corridor and emerged into his childhood home. His mother stood there, smiling. Alive. She hugged him, whispered things he hadn't heard since he was 6. Briggs stepped into a chamber and saw his daughter, grown, whole, laughing, forgiving. The beacon didn't fight with guns. It fought with dreams. Cora's voice crackled through to Reeve. "Cognitive resistance is failing. We are losing them." Reeve activated emergency override protocols, screamed through the comms. "It's not real. Don't trust it. The people you love are gone." Jax froze. His mother's eyes turned black. Her hands became claws. Briggs backed away from his daughter, now covered in bleeding mouths. They remembered, and they fought. Reeve triggered the countdown. 10 minutes. The neural core began to pulse, and then the architects came. Not ships, not soldiers, but avatars of thought. They appeared on every deck, in every room, mirrors made flesh, each one wearing the face of someone the crew had lost. One stood before Reeve, wearing his own face. "You could be more," it said. "You could be peace." "I am peace," Reeve whispered. the kind that comes after the screaming stops. And then he fired. The explosion shattered the psychic field. The beacon screamed, not in noise but in memory. Every architect structure in the galaxy shook. Ships collapsed, dreams fractured, and the illusions died. The galaxy woke up. The fleet didn't celebrate. Too many lost, too many damaged. Jax lost half his face in the overload. Briggs had to be sedated, his mind still stuck in the vision of his daughter. Cole lost an eye, and a memory he refused to speak about. And Reeve? Reeve sat alone in the dark, listening to the silence that followed victory. Cora's voice broke through after a long time. The architects have gone dark. No transmissions, no activity. Reeve nodded. Prepare the next target. Cora paused. You're not done. Reeve's voice was hollow. Peace was never the goal. The silence after the beacon's fall wasn't peace. It was the calm before something darker. The architects hadn't been destroyed, only wounded. Their influence shattered, but their presence remained. The galaxy felt it. The dreams had stopped, the voices faded, but the void was watching. And so was Earth. 2 weeks passed in silence. No transmission, no rescue, no declaration of support. Earth didn't even acknowledge the beacon attack. Reeve didn't expect them to. He sat alone on the bridge of the Judgment, boots on the table, watching a feed of empty space. The stars didn't shine here. They just lingered, like ghosts too tired to haunt anything. Cora broke the silence. Priority transmission intercepted. Origin, Earth. Classification, Black Vault. Reeve raised an eyebrow. Put it through. The screen flickered to life. Not a video, just audio. Broken, fragmented. Fleet, compromised. Standing order Theta Victor 0. All rogue assets to be terminated. Human compliance essential. The message looped 3 times, then cut. Briggs walked in just as the signal faded. That what I think it is? Reeve nodded. We're not just abandoned. We're kill on sight now. Briggs snorted. About time they made it official. The declaration didn't surprise anyone in the fleet. These men hadn't worn flags for years. They weren't patriots. They were weapons that had outlived their usefulness. But what did surprise them was the timing. The architects were broken. The galaxy finally saw them for what they were. Harvesters, not saviors. But now Earth wanted to step in and take control, rewrite the narrative, paint the fleet as dangerous radicals who nearly destroyed everything. They weren't just enemies of the architects now, they were enemies of order. Jax, wrapped in bandages from the beacon assault, spoke first during the briefing. They're gonna try and wipe us off the map, clean the slate. Cole nodded. They'll come in shiny ships with flags and speeches, pretend they're here to save the galaxy, but they're not here for justice. They're here for control. Reeve stood at the front, silent for a long time. They can try, he said, but they don't get to bury the truth. Not this time. The fleet divided. Some ships were too damaged to continue. Crews too broken to fight. They were given cloaked coordinates to drift in peace, far from Earth's eyes. Others volunteered for the final phase, Operation Pale Fire, a targeted data strike, not on Earth's systems, on its history. Reeve had spent years collecting classified files, black site data, war logs buried by politicians. At first it was insurance, but now it was ammunition. They would unleash the truth. About the Valari Pact, about the beacon experiments, about the politicians who had ordered children sacrificed for psychic stability. It would be war, but not with guns, with memory. They slipped through the core rings like phantoms. Earth's defenses were impressive. Drones, orbital weapons, deep space scanners, but none of them were built to fight ghosts. The Judgment didn't fire a single shot. It just broadcasted everything, every document, every video, every voice recording, to every colony, every station, every citizen. Within minutes, Earth's network crashed. Social unrest exploded. Uprisings on Luna, riots on Europa, mass defections in the inner ring. And the fleet? Gone before Earth could respond. But Earth wasn't the only one watching. The Valari, shamed and scattered, made contact. Reeve agreed to meet them, not in peace, but in understanding. The meeting took place on a neutral station, abandoned since the Red Eclipse War. The Valari envoy had aged, skin faded, eyes tired. He bowed deeply. "We were wrong." Reeve stared at him. "You weren't wrong. You were cowards." The envoy didn't argue. "You gave us to the architects." "Yes." "And now you want forgiveness?" "No," the envoy whispered. "We want purpose. We want to fight." Reeve said nothing for a long time. Then he nodded. The war changed again. The architects were retreating, slowly, cautiously. Their structures dimmed, their ships flickered. But they were not dead. Because now they were evolving. They had begun creating avatars, hybrids of the species they'd consumed, designed for infiltration and counter-emotion warfare. The first one appeared on a mining moon. It looked human. It spoke like a human. It wept like a child. And it killed everyone in the colony before they realized what it was. Cora confirmed the truth. They are learning, adapting, using what they fear to build something new. "Can we stop it?" Cole asked. "No," Reeve answered, "but we can break it." The fleet assembled one last time. Not the whole armada, just those willing to take the final leap. The Judgment, the Sable Wolf, the Iron Sun, the Echo Shard, and the Black Reef. Each ship had lost more crew than it had left, but the ones who remained, they were no longer soldiers. They were nightmares, born from betrayal and rage, and they would finish what was started. The final plan wasn't a strike. It was a virus, not code, emotion. Cora had developed a delivery system, a cognitive burst layered with every raw, broken human memory the fleet had endured. Every scream, every death, every loss. It would detonate at the heart of the Architect network. It wouldn't kill them. It would show them what it meant to be human, what it meant to survive with pain, not despite it. As they jumped into Architect space, Reeve sent one last message to Earth, to the Architects, to everyone. "You tried to erase us, but we are not symbols, not peace, not harmony. We are the fire that burns the story down." Then he cut the transmission and disappeared into the dark. The fleet of legends entered Architect space for the last time, not with weapons drawn, not with a cry for war, but in silence. The stars in this part of the galaxy didn't move. They shimmered like memories caught in static. There was no gravity, no time, no temperature, just an overwhelming presence. The Architect's domain wasn't physical. It was mental. It existed because minds remembered it. It stayed alive because thoughts fed it. And now 5 dying ships and a few broken men carried the last plague of memory into its heart. The Judgment led the way, its engines burning black and slow. Reeve stood on the bridge, face pale under the flickering lights, voice steady despite the weight in his chest. Cora, the ship's AI, activated the final protocol. Ashfall. A cognitive bomb. A weapon not of mass, but of meaning. It had no explosive force, no radiation. It detonated everything that made a human remember being human. Inside each ship, the crew prepared. Briggs sat alone in the engine room of the Iron Sun, hands pressed together. He had written a message for his daughter. It wouldn't be delivered. He knew that. But he'd recorded it anyway, just in case memory survived the void. Cole was silent aboard the Echo Shard, watching a looping image of his brother smiling just once, before the red riots took him. Cole didn't cry. He didn't speak. He just memorized that image like a holy scripture. Jax, wrapped in synthetic skin, stood before a mirror, staring at the monster war had made him. "They wanted to erase me," he whispered. "Let them try." Reeve. Reeve didn't pray, didn't write. He stood on the bridge and waited. And the architects came. They didn't appear all at once. They unfolded, like a thought too big to hold, ships made of light and bone, faces that were not faces, voices without mouths. They surrounded the fleet, but they didn't fire. They spoke, through every system, every neural channel, every screen. "You are remnants," they said. "You are suffering." "We are memory," Reeve replied, "and you made the mistake of thinking that could be controlled." The architects responded, not with rage, but confusion. "You preserve pain. You nurture chaos. You poison peace." Reeve stepped closer to the command interface. "You called it poison. We call it proof. That we existed, that we fought, that we loved so hard it broke us." "You resist unity," the voice pressed. "We are unity," Reeve whispered, "but not the kind you want. Ours is made of scars." And then he pressed the trigger. The ashfall detonated. It didn't flash. It didn't roar. It echoed. Across architect space, across every strand of thought they had ever stolen, the payload fired like a scream that had waited too long to be heard. It was every last moment the fleet had endured. The dying screams of the Titan uprising, the betrayal on Earth, the Valari's cowardice, the children handed over to the architects, the silence after the beacon's fall, every forgotten name, every erased soldier, every twisted memory, all of it, everything, delivered in one perfect moment. The effect was instant. The architect ships began to flicker, not vanish, not explode. They remembered. They remembered the pain they had buried, the agony they had stolen, the grief they had filtered out in their pursuit of order. And they couldn't process it. Because pain requires identity, and identity requires limits. The architects, for the first time in their existence, broke. One by one, their structures folded in on themselves, not violently, not with fire, but with quiet, like a book being closed. The stars began to move again, the static lifted, and the void wept. Back on Earth, the impact was immediate. The broadcast went galaxy-wide, not the ashfall itself, but the aftershocks. Civilizations began dreaming again. People remembered the things they'd buried. Some laughed, some screamed, some fell to their knees. But they felt. And in the center of it all, on every screen, on every speaker, was a simple message. We were not forgotten. We chose this pain, because it meant we were real. And then the signal went dark. The Judgment and the rest of the fleet were never seen again. No wreckage, no beacons, no distress calls, just silence. Some say they died in that final blast, that they were consumed by their own memories. Others believe something stranger, that they became something more, guardians of truth, of memory, of pain that would never be erased again. Years passed. Earth rebuilt, but never spoke of the fleet again. Official records marked them as lost during unauthorized combat in hostile space. The truth, as always, was whispered, in bars, in back alleys, in resistance cells on fringe worlds, stories of a fleet that fought gods, of a commander who turned grief into fire, of men who couldn't be erased. And always the same ending. They came when no one else would. They fought when everyone else gave up, and they left behind a galaxy that would never forget again. On the edge of known space, far beyond mapped stars, an old satellite picked up a transmission, barely audible, just static, and a voice, Reeve's voice. I remember. Then silence, then a heartbeat, then nothing.